All right, good afternoon and welcome to today's live keynote lecture, The Astonishing Effects of Exercise on the Brain with Wendy Suzuki. A few housekeeping things before we get started. This is a voice over IP webinar, meaning it's totally web-based. If you experience audio difficulties or if the video begins to buffer, it's likely caused by the strength of your internet signal. If you're having issues, log off and log back on. If you have a question during the keynote lecture, please type it into the question area within the GoToWebinar navigation, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. We also encourage you to join the conversation about today's keynote lecture on Twitter by using the hashtag ACSM Summit. Today's keynote lecture is presented as a part of the virtual summit series. It is with great pleasure that ACSM presents to you Dr. Deb Reby, who will introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Wendy Suzuki. Dr. Suzuki is a professor of neuroscience and psychology at New York University, where she studies the effects of aerobic exercise on brain function. She is an award-winning scientist and best-selling author of the popular book, Healthy Brain, Happy Life, that was recently made into a PBS science special. Dr. Suzuki is a passionate thought leader, spreading the scientific understanding of how physical activity can change, improve, and protect your brain. She's an enormously popular speaker with the second most popular TED Talk of 2018. Well, we're very sorry we missed being able to see Dr. Suzuki in person at the Health Fitness Summit. We are so thrilled that she's here with us today. So without any further introduction, Dr. Suzuki.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reby. It's such a pleasure to be here. Sorry we couldn't be here live, but I promise I'm going to do the best that I can to make this just as good. So I want to talk about what I really truly consider astonishing effects of physical activity on your brain. And the core idea I want to talk about is the idea of brain plasticity. So you might have heard about this. What does brain plasticity mean? I want to start everybody off on a clear definition. So brain plasticity refers to anything that changes the brain, particularly from the outside environment. So exercise is one thing that can cause brain plasticity. And one great way to visualize it is the idea that if you have a brain that might look like this, maybe not fully self-actualized, brain plasticity means that certain kinds of experiences can make your brain go from this all the way to this. So fully self-actualized with all the right parts. Unfortunately, brain plasticity means that other kinds of experiences can make the brain go back to the brain on the left. So we're going to be talking about kinds of forms of brain plasticity that go in the right-hand direction today. And I started out my whole career, for the first 20, 25 years of my entire neuroscience career, was devoted to one particular aspect of brain plasticity, probably the most common, and that is our ability to learn and remember new facts and events, that is long-term memory. That ability is dependent on a structure called the hippocampus. And I want to start here because we're going to come back to the hippocampus time and time again in this talk. In the center of the screen, you see a cutout of a human brain. The hippocampus is the blue structure that's located deep in the temporal lobe. Hippocampus means seahorse, and in the upper right-hand corner, you see that the dissected human hippocampus does actually look quite a bit like a seahorse. Why was I interested in this? Memories are really what builds our own personal histories. And I wanted to understand what was it about the hippocampus that allowed us to form a memory that could last decades when that experience might have only lasted a moment. So I became an expert on the anatomy, the physiology, and the function of the hippocampus. And that's how I got my job, my first faculty position at New York University. That's also how I got into my second area of research, which is exercise. So what happened there is that maybe some of you have had this experience, working so hard, trying to get tenure. It's a 6-year, very long process to do the work and do the kind of creative, novel science work. such exciting times in the lab. And if I think back on a picture of what that looked like this. Great dinner party with the atmosphere in my lab over those first 6 years. Why? We were discovering new things about the hippocampus and the neurophysiological patterns that underlie new memory formation. There was always somebody interesting to talk to and some interesting new finding to talk about. However, during the same time period, if I think back and think about my social life, this is the image that comes to mind. So not very festive. I not only kind of buried myself in work, but I ate so much takeout. New York City, I happen to be in New York City. It's plenty of amazing takeout. I also gained 25 pounds, and that was really what sent me to the gym. I needed to lose this 25 pounds. Wasn't doing any physical work at all. And that was the start of my shift towards my devotion and my research on the effects of exercise. I remember I went to that very first class that really made me come back to the gym time and time again. It was a class taught by an amazing fitness instructor in New York City. Her name is Patricia Moreno. She created this workout called Intensati that pairs physical movements with positive spoken affirmations. So you don't just punch like you would in kickboxing class, but as you punch, you say out these affirmations like, I am strong now. And well, the first minutes of that class, I felt like an idiot trying to say these affirmations. One, it actually made the workout more cardio because you have to expend more cardiovascular effort to actually shout out these affirmations at the same time that you're doing the physical movements. But also just saying and declaring these affirmations was incredibly empowering. And so that was the class that I loved. A year and a half later, I've lost the 25 pounds. I was so full of energy and that I was just feeling so good. But one day in my office, I noticed something that was going to change my career. I noticed that my grant writing was going better. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just having a good day. But when I thought about it, I realized that over the last few months, my focus was deeper and longer. Anybody that has written a grant, science or otherwise, knows, or written anything, knows that you need deep, focused attention to be able to write well. Second, my long-term memory dependent on the hippocampus, which I was studying right back there in my lab, seemed to be better. I seemed to be able to recall information in all of the hundreds of research papers that I was trying to synthesize together into my $1 million NIH grant. I also knew that the only big thing that I'd changed in my life was my regular exercise. And so what did I do? I went back to the literature to see what I could find about the effects of exercise. What did we know about the effects of exercise? And I ran into the history and a very, very dominant figure. Her name is Marion C. Diamond. This is her. Can you tell which one she is? This is from her heyday when she made these first discoveries that I'm going to talk about in the early 1960s. And she's very familiar to me because she was also my undergraduate mentor at UC Berkeley when I was there in the 1980s. I helped her with some of these studies. These are the studies that made me go into neuroscience. What were these studies? She asked whether raising rats in particular kinds of environments, exposing them to particular kinds of brain plasticity could change their brains. And so at that time, it was thought that the adult brain had no capacity to change. There was no evidence for that. But she did a very elegant experiment where she raised rats in either what she called enriched environments. That is rat cages with lots of other rats, free food and water, but also lots of toys that got changed out every day. Very sensorially stimulating environment. She compared the brains of those rats to the rats given the same food and water, but in a much smaller cage with maybe only one other rat to interact with. And if the adult brain didn't change, then nothing should be different about these brains. Well, what she found is rats raised in these enriched environments had changed the anatomy, physiology and function of the brain for the better. The outer covering of the brain, if you can see my arrow out here, this is a rat brain. These were the species she was looking at. The outer covering, called the cortex out here, was significantly thicker in the enriched environment brains, the rats that had been raised in enriched environments. Neurotransmitters levels in the cortex were higher. There were more synapses, that is the communication modality between individual neurons. There were more synapses, that is more communication. Angiogenesis is the birth of brand new blood vessels. The brain is the #1 user of oxygen. So the more blood vessels, the more perfused and the better working the brain is. There were more growth factors, and she showed something quite extraordinary, that rats raised in enriched environments had higher levels of hippocampal neurogenesis. That is the birth of brand new brain cells in the hippocampus. This is extraordinary because now we know that in adulthood, there's only 2 structures in our entire brain that where new neurons can be born as adults. One is the olfactory bulb, important for smell. That doesn't get stimulated. More new brain cells are not stimulated with exercise there. The second brain area is the hippocampus, critical for long-term memory formation. And she showed that environmental enrichment can actually help the enhance the birth of new neurons. So you get more new neurons if you are in these enriched environments. Well, later studies asked, what was it about the enriched environments that caused all these extraordinary brain changes? So here is a schematic real enriched environment with lots of toys, rats playing around, and you can see the different elements in there. And my friend and colleague, Henriette von Prague, did the critical studies where she identified that the thing that you need out of this environment is that running wheel. Giving the rat the running wheel actually conferred all of these same changes. You didn't need the whole environment. You just needed access to that running wheel, to exercise. And that was really amazing. Exercise also significantly improved and increased hippocampal neurogenesis. That means that all the rats have to do to get even more hippocampal brain cells is run on the wheel. Now, since that time, extraordinary work all in these animal model systems have been done. We know more about what is causing the hippocampal neurogenesis, and that goes to the list above, or the item above, which is growth factors. One of the growth factors that you might have heard of is called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. First identified, here is the reference in 1995 by Carl Kottman and his colleagues, showing that if rats run on the wheel, here's another picture of a rat running on a wheel, you get huge increases of BDNF, specifically in the hippocampus. We knew that it was important for early development of the newborn brain. But it turns out that BDNF is essential to help stimulate these brand new neurons in the hippocampus to grow and integrate. So fantastic. What do these new hippocampal cells, the hippocampal neurogenesis, do? Does it help? Does it hurt? Exercise improves not only the level of hippocampal neurogenesis, you get more new neurons, but you get improvements on a wide range of cognitive memory-dependent tasks that are memory tasks that are dependent on the hippocampus. And this just shows a few. Pattern separation is a fancy way to say memory encoding. There are spatial memory tasks that are improved with exercise in rodents, and that's very important because the hippocampus is particularly involved in spatial memory. Object recognition is improved, and contextual fear conditioning, another task that we know is highly dependent on the hippocampus, is improved. So fantastic, all these animal studies. What about the human studies? Well, when I went back to the clinical literature, again, this was after noticing my own improvement in memory, in mood, and in focus. I saw evidence of that in the human clinical literature as well. That is, even walking can improve mood. Many studies showing that, and increases in aerobic exercise had led to many studies showing improved focus and attention, as well as improved long-term memory. So this is fantastic. What am I going to do? I am going to, and sorry, let me just turn this off for a second. Okay, so what I was going to do is explore more this effect, and the best way to learn about a new scientific discovery is to actually teach a new class on it. So as an undergraduate teacher, I decided to teach a new class on this new discovery that I'd made in myself, that is how physical activity seemed to be improving my brain. I seem to have evidence from animal studies, some of which historically I'd participated in, and lots of clinical studies. And so that's a great way to learn. I had to do a new class anyway, so I developed a class called Can Exercise Change Your Brain? And I decided that exercise and going to the gym and kind of feeling these effects were the inspiration. So wouldn't it be fun if I could bring exercise into the classroom? So I've been very excited to be able to tell this story to the American College of Sports Medicine. So I decided to bring exercise into the classroom. And when my department wouldn't pay for an exercise instructor to come into the classroom, I decided to go and get certified in my favorite class at the gym, this Intensati class, and teach the exercise class myself. So started my most extensive class preparation in my entire career. I took teacher training. I trained for 6 months to get good at teaching this class, because while I was going to the class a lot, it's very different to step in front of the classroom. And of course, this was such a fun period because during that time, I was reading all of the background material, getting more and more and more excited about the evidence mounting for the effects of exercise on the brain. So I'll never forget that very first day of class. It was really memorable for 3 different reasons. One, I was very nervous. I usually don't get nervous teaching classes with at that point 15 years of lectures under my belt, but I'd never taught an exercise class in an NYU classroom before, so I was very nervous. 2, I came to class clad in my best Lululemon, which was a little bit unusual. Usually don't teach in Lululemon. And the third was the students themselves. They literally looked terrified. I think it was me and my Lululemon. They knew that they were going to exercise, didn't quite realize they were going to exercise with me. But I can tell you that class changed not only the way that I teach, because there's a huge engagement when you get to sweat with your students before class, which kind of really upped the level of interaction that I got in that classroom. But it changed my research, because what I didn't say is I realized this was the perfect opportunity to do a study on the effects of 1 semester increase of aerobic exercise. We did, and that was the start of the shift of my entire career. And so because I've told you that there are immediate effects of exercise, there are mood effects, and in fact, what we're going to go over in 5 minutes is you even get improved ability to focus your attention. I want to take a little break here and invite you all to stand up and do 5 minutes of Intensati with me to bring you back to that classroom, but also to prepare your brain, because we're going to start the neuroscience segment right after that. Okay, so hopefully you can see me all. Okay, so we are going to do, not 5 minutes, just 3 minutes, but I want you all to stand up. Thousands of you out there, well, hundreds of you out there. Stand up, shake it out just for a second. You know this is going to be good for your brain. This workout is a call and response. All you have to do is do what I do, say what I say. And so the first move is gonna be punches right and left, and we're gonna be punching right and left. I'm gonna turn the music on in a second, and I'm gonna say an affirmation, and I'm gonna say your turn. And I want you to say it back. I can't hear you, but I can feel whether you're going to say it back to me, okay? Remember, this is the workout we did for an hour before my Can Exercise Change Your Brain class. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Hope you can hear that. 4, 3, 2. Punches go right, left, right, left. Right, left, right, left. I say, I am strong now. You say it. Again, I am really strong. Your turn. Last time, I am strong now. Your turn. New move, uppercut, right and left, right, left, right, left. I say, I am inspired now. You say it. Again, I am inspired now. You. Last time, I am inspired now. You say it. Next move, push it. Okay, you should be feeling it now. I am pumped up right now. You say it. Again, I am pumped up right now. You. Last time, I am pumped up right now. Last time, pull and pull. Pull and pull. Use your arms. I am on fire now. You. Again, I am on fire now. You. Last time, I am on fire now. You. Done. All right. I hope that was a good break. I hope it got your blood pumping. I hope it got your brain ready, because we're about to jump in to tell you exactly what is happening when you move your body in that way. Okay. Here we go. And let me go back to my slides. Oops. All right. Okay. So, did the class, got inspired, learned all about the effects of exercise on the brain, not only from an academic standpoint, but from teaching this class, teaching the classes that I've been teaching now for the last 10 years, physical exercise, oftentimes associated with exercise, with lectures like this. So here is a real preserved human brain. Her name is Betty. She lives in my lab. And I bring her out to show 2 key areas that we're going to focus on for the rest of this talk. Just to give you a little bit of orientation, this is the front of the brain here, the prefrontal cortex. Right behind here is your forehead. Back of the brain, here's the cerebellum, important for balance, fine motor balance, and here is the temporal lobe. So the 2 key brain areas that I'm going to focus on mainly are the prefrontal cortex right here, which helps us focus and shift our attention. It's important for decision making. It houses our personality. It's the area that psychologists state is important for what we call executive function, keeping track of things, order of things. And then the next is deep, again, in the temporal lobe. I already showed you the location of the hippocampus, deep in this lobe right here. Why are these 2 areas important? We're going to come back to this at the end. They are important because the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus are the two areas that tend to be most vulnerable in aging and neurodegenerative disease, okay? But we're starting before that, okay? So I want to share with you the neuroscience behind the transformative effects of physical activity on the brain. And there are three transformative effects that I want to go over. Number one, the immediate effects of exercise on the brain. We all did just 3 minutes of exercise, and hopefully that got your blood pumping. It woke you up. It perhaps even got you a better mood. And what is happening there? Well, obviously there's so many things going on. And I will point you to a review that my wonderful postdoc, who now is a faculty member, Julia Basso, and I wrote about the immediate effects of exercise, that is acute exercise, on mood, cognition, neurophysiology, and neurochemical pathways. This chart from that really sums it up. What we measured is we went to the literature and looked at all of the neurochemical changes that had been explored immediately after exercise. And there are metabolic changes in lactate, changes in cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Exercise is a stress, so you do see increases in cortisol. Neurotrophins, including BDNF here, going up for at least 90 minutes. Neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters, you'll see notable neurotransmitters that increase after a single bout of exercise include dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. These are the neurotransmitters that are going up that give you that good mood boost. Energy, it goes up with exercise. But we also see opioids and endocannabinoids also being affected in some studies by this. And so what I like to, the image that I like to give is that every time you do a bout of exercise, you are literally giving your brain a bubble bath of what? All these different neurochemicals, okay? So it's a wonderful bubble bath of neurochemicals, but what happens? What are the behavioral effects? Number one, most easy, common to see, mood effects. You get anxiety levels, depression levels going down. You get energy levels going up. Why? Because of the noradrenaline, the dopamine and serotonin going up. But that's not the only thing that are measured clinically after just a single bout of exercise. Focus and attention, dependent on the prefrontal cortex up here, also go up significantly after a single bout of exercise. And reaction time, that is your ability to respond in a motor way based on a cognitive task, also goes up. The mechanisms of focus, attention, and reaction time are not as well studied, but clearly those are in the literature. Mood, it's clear that the exercise stimulating these neurotransmitters are underlying that. So I want to give you a flavor for some of these studies. So this is one that Julia Basso and I studied, looking at the immediate effects of acute exercise. We didn't look at mood, but we focused on the role of exercise in improving prefrontal cortex. So what we did is we had a group of 50 young adults. These were college students. We gave them cognitive testing before and after a 60-minute indoor exercise bike workout, where we asked them to get up to 85% max heart rate. And we compared them to another 43 who sat around and watched somebody else jump around in a very aerobic way, watching this old TV show, 24. And so what did we see? On a range of tasks that are dependent on the prefrontal cortex. These are tasks that require you to focus your attention or shift your attention from one thing to another. What we see is significantly better performance after the exercise, the 60 minutes of bike riding compared to the video watching. That was a clear result, and no change, no difference in hippocampal function. Why? Because we certainly didn't expect brand new hippocampal cells to pop up within the framework of that 60-minute workout, and then we waited for at least 30 minutes before we tested them cognitively. It takes much longer for these hippocampal neurogenesis effects to happen, and we did not see that. Okay, so immediate effects of aerobic exercise, causing a neurochemical bubble bath that is improving mood, focus and attention, as well as reaction time. That's what you get from a single workout right after the workout. But what about the long-term effects of improving your physical activity? Let's say you change your cardio, you improve your cardiorespiratory function. That is very interesting, and that brings us back to those original studies by Marion Diamond and her colleagues, where she looked at, this wasn't just one day in the enriched environment, it was many months in the enriched environment. In fact, in those early studies, those rats were running around a lot more than the rats in the impoverished environment. And of course, in the exercise study, you're seeing all of these same changes. What do we see in humans? Well, let me take you through another study where we wanted to look at a particular age group that has been kind of less focused on in the population, and that is people between the ages of 30 and 50. Why? Because many of these exercise studies have focused on older population. Cognition goes down, there is an immediate need to improve cognition. However, we wanted to ask, even in high functioning young people, you might think, you don't have any window to improve. Can you still see these improvements from changing your cardiorespiratory function? So we partnered with an amazing fitness company in New York City, Swerve Spin Studio, and we had 24 people come in. They were low fit, and they did cognitive tests before and after 12 weeks of workouts where they pledged to go to spin class 3 times a week. These are challenging classes, so this was a great workout for them. Of course, they got all the classes for free. And this Swerve studio has a particular characteristic where you go in and you sign up to ride on the red bikes, the green bikes, or the blue bikes. And what they do is they're very technologically advanced, and they estimate your caloric input based on your weight and how hard you're pedaling. And so what the teachers can do is they can average together all of the caloric input of the red team, the blue team, and the green team, so that you could have friendly competition that way. So we needed a control group that also had friendly competition, but no aerobics. Our solution, competitive Scrabble. So these control people came into the lab and they played competitively against my undergraduate volunteers in the lab. No aerobics, but still for the same amount of time and with that same friendly competition. So our first big finding is spin class increases your heart rate a lot more than competitive Scrabble down here. So that was a great finding. No, but we took, obviously, to be thorough, we took the heart rate of both the exercisers and the video game players. And clearly there was a huge difference. Did our exercisers improve their fitness? They started out low fit with not a regular exercise regimen. Yes. Compared to the control group, there was significant improvement in their cardiorespiratory fitness. Okay, so if that was the case, we got them to exercise. That is hard, as many of you probably know better than I do. What do we see cognitively? Cognitively, we see that exercise improved a range of functions and mood effects. So positive affect, levels of kind of baseline positive affect went up in the exercise group, up here in green. Exercise motivation went up. So it turns out if you exercise more, your motivation for exercise goes up. This is consistent with some of the previous literature, but sadly, if you do not exercise as the control group did, your motivation tends to go down. Body attitudes are improved in the exercise group, and recognition memory. What is recognition memory? Recognition memory is if you walk down the street and you say, you're familiar. I saw you last week when I took the subway. that is recognition memory. We do it all the time, and it's dependent on the hippocampus and related structures. So here we're starting to see improvement in structures that are dependent on the hippocampus, on functions that are dependent on the hippocampus. Why is that important? Well, we're reaching a time range. This was a 3-month study where we would expect to see improved hippocampal neurogenesis and improved hippocampal function. Now, this data set is still being analyzed, and one finding that just came out is that we also saw in this group improved performance on what we call a Stroop task. Those of you in neuropsychology are very familiar with it. It's a task of that forces you to shift and focus your attention, and very highly dependent on the prefrontal cortex. And we see significant improvements in that in the exercise group compared to the controls. So exciting findings. These are being written up. These are studies done in my lab being written up right now that are starting to parallel the findings in those rats in the exercise studies and the enriched environment studies. Okay. But the study wasn't over, because we were also interested in the EEG, the electroencephalogram. Could we see a electrophysiological signal of these improvements of exercise before versus after the or after versus before the exercise intervention? And so this is one of our subjects wearing the EEG cap, and a lot of our findings focused on just the baseline EEG, how your brain is responding when you are simply staring at that central fixation dot that you see on the screen. So what we found is in the exercise group, we got significantly improved power of alpha waves in the exercise group compared to the sedentary group. Why is that important? Alpha waves are associated with relaxation. We did not study this extensively, but many previous studies have shown mood improvements with this level of cardiovascular change. And so what that seems to correlate with is improved alpha levels at rest. Again, relaxation waves are stronger in the exercise group at rest compared to the sedentary group. So we're starting to see the first hints of neurophysiological signals that change with exercise, along with our behavioral signals that I showed you right here. Okay, so these are long-term changes consistent with the idea that enriched environments and exercise in rodent populations really do change the brain's anatomy, physiology, and function, including that extraordinary effect of enhancing hippocampal neurogenesis. Now, I have no evidence except for improved recognition memory that that's what's happening here, but this is missing in the human literature. So this is a really exciting new finding that is consistent with the idea that these people were benefiting from hippocampal neurogenesis. And I'll just remind you, that is one of the first self-observations that made me really look at this finding more seriously. My own memory was improved. I know the definition of hippocampal dependent memory, and that was clearly observed in myself, an N of 1, but now we have experimental evidence starting to gather here. Okay, so that's the long-term effect. I want to end with the third transformative effect of physical activity on the brain, are the protective effects on the brain. And what do I mean by protective effects? Well, remember I told you that the two brain areas that are most susceptible to aging and neurodegenerative disease states are the prefrontal cortex here and the hippocampus deep in the temporal lobe. I've also just told you that long-term exercise will stimulate the birth of what I like to call shiny new hippocampal cells in your hippocampus. I like to share that because that is literally the image that I take as I'm these days doing my exercise right in my living room right here to motivate me. I am doing my exercise because I want as many shiny new hippocampal cells in my hippocampus as possible, because I love memory. I need it, I use it, I want as much good memory as I can, and that is my motivation. So exercise is stimulating the birth of brand new hippocampal cells, and it is significantly improving prefrontal cortex. In fact, probably the number 2 most common effect in human clinical studies of exercise after mood is prefrontal improvements, improvements in frontal lobe function. So these 2 areas are being enhanced, and in fact, not only does the hippocampus grow, but functional imaging studies and structural imaging studies show that there are size differences in the prefrontal cortex with exercise as well, though the mechanism of that is not as well understood. So what is the hypothesis here? The hypothesis here is that in this case, you can think of the brain like a muscle. The more you work out, the bigger and fatter and fluffier your hippocampus is. Why? Because of hippocampal neurogenesis that is stimulated by physical activity. And 2, the more you work out, the bigger and stronger and more functional is your prefrontal cortex and your ability to shift and focus attention, okay? And so if you do this over a lifetime, and remember, every single time is you're giving this bubble bath, so you are kind of enhancing, enriching your brain every single time. What are you doing? You're not rolling back the hands of time. You're not curing Alzheimer's disease, which starts in the hippocampus with attacking those cells, but you're making these brain areas as big and strong, as functional as possible, so you can stave off the declines that come with aging, and particularly with neurodegenerative disease states. Now, you might say, well, Wendy, that is a lot of assumption right there. What is the evidence that this is really working in people? I took pains to show you the detailed animal studies at the beginning. And if you're going to believe me in humans, we need to confirm 3 predictions. 1, I showed you evidence that there is neurogenesis in the hippocampus of adult rodents, and that goes into old age. But in fact, if you were following the literature, you would know that there's a huge debate raging about whether there is detectable adult human neurogenesis into older age. In fact, the year that my TED Talk came out, 3 years ago, that debate was really big, and I got asked about that, and I said, look, for many years we've come a long way with assuming that the rodent model, mammalian model is a great model for humans. So until this is resolved, I go with the main finding from rats, that there is adult human neurogenesis. And in fact, just this year, there were several beautiful studies. This is an illustration from a review of this paper up here, Moreno Jimenez, who confirmed that there is birth of brand new hippocampal cells into the 9th and even 10th decade of human life. So it absolutely continues during aging, and that it is decreased in both MCI, mild cognitive impairment, as well as in Alzheimer's disease. So this is a wonderful new piece of information coming down the pike that helps us better interpret all that beautiful work that has been done in the rodents. Okay, that's prediction number 1. What about prediction number 2? Is there evidence that exercise decreases the probability of developing dementia later in life? Because I just told you that it could stave off dementia using principles of how exercise is acting on the brain. So this is one of my favorite studies. And again, I'm just giving you single studies of a range of studies, so you have something to really glom onto if you want to go back and read these. This is a recent study from 2018, and this was done in Swedish women. It was a 44-year longitudinal follow-up study where in the late 60s, they looked at women in their 40s, and they characterized those women as mid-fit high fit or low fit. Okay, so they looked at their fitness level. 44 years later, they went to live their lives. 44 years later, they came back and reassessed them and asked what happened to them. Did they die? Did they have dementia? What they found is if you were high fit at middle age, it conferred 9 extra years of good cognition later in life. Okay, that is not a randomized control study. It is a longitudinal cross-sectional study. However, it gives you the boundaries of what is possible and what kind of protection we might be talking about. 9 years of extra good cognition later in life. Okay, and what about the third prediction? Is there evidence that exercise can improve cognition even in those already suffering from Alzheimer's disease? Because that should be the case, especially if there's neurogenesis even later in life, even if it's diminished in Alzheimer's disease. And this is my favorite study to support that idea. 2018, these are people that have genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's disease. It was a whole cohort, and they looked at these people that they knew were going to get Alzheimer's disease based on their genetics, and they looked at whether they were low fit, mid fit, high fit. Significantly better cognition in this population if you were exercising regularly compared to if you were not. So even in people that already had started showing signs of the disease, you can get benefits from exercise. So that's great. That is the protective effect of exercise. So this should make everybody go home and say, I have a new motivation to exercise every day. It's not just that I want great muscle tone. I want a big, fat, fluffy hippocampus and an even bigger prefrontal cortex. Okay, and so the last 2 questions I want to address are key questions for everybody in this audience. 1, what is the mechanism? How is this happening magically that you work out and you do some, aerobics with affirmations and suddenly your brain gets better? Well, here again, we are starting to improve and have some really exciting new findings. And much of that excitement derives around brain-derived neurotrophic factor. We know a lot about that. So these are studies all from rodent models. And what are the mechanisms? Well, I can tell you that the mechanisms that go from kind of moving your body on the outside to hippocampal function are going through 2 different modalities, one through the muscles and one through the liver. I've highlighted 4 studies that have identified 4 different pathways, 2 muscle related and 2 liver related. Irisin was kind of the first big exciting thing that was shown. It is a hormone that's released by muscles during exercise, and it's associated with improved increased levels of BDNF in the hippocampus. That was our first clue of how exercise was getting to BDNF levels in the hippocampus. But then in 2016, cathepsin was identified by Henriette von Praagslab, which is a myokine, which is a protein released by the muscle, not the same as irisin, but that goes through the blood-brain barrier and stimulates the birth of brand new cells in the hippocampus. But the muscles are not the only thing that are playing a role. The liver turns out to be, surprisingly, very important. Beta-hydroxybutyrate is a ketone body released by the liver that my colleague Moses Chow at NYU Medical Center showed gets through the blood-brain barrier, goes into the hippocampus, and can stimulate the transcription of BDNF. And finally, save this one for last because some of you might have seen it was just talked about, and it was just came out in July this month in the journal Science. This is another liver factor, GPLD1, that's released with exercise, and higher levels of GPLD1 are associated with better performance. They did something very, very cool. They did something called heterochronic parabiosis, which is surgically linking the circulatory system of a younger rat who exercised with an older rat who did not exercise. And when you do that, you get better hippocampal neurogenesis and better performance. What is it about that link? What's in the good blood of the young exercising rat that gets to the old blood? Well, one of those factors is GPLD1, and very, very exciting new direction. And but in fact, the same author recently wrote a review paper and said, you know, there's two exciting new directions for kind of helping and stemming the negative effects of aging. One is heterochronic parabiosis. So if you have a friend that wants to get surgically attached to you, you can do that. The second one is exercise. I think the obvious direction that we need to go is exercise, which leads me to the second question, the most common question. How much exercise do I really need to do? The way it's usually asked is, how little exercise do I really need to do? And that is the question that I'll leave you with, because that is the question that I am focused on in my lab. And I can tell you that it's not one size fits all. It will depend on your fitness level. So a low fit person will be able to do a certain amount of exercise to get their heart rate up. That will be a very different level of exercise than a high fit person. What is that exercise that is maximally improving both the immediate effects of exercise and the long-term effects of exercise, when we know that the metabolic effects of exercise do change over the lifespan? These are really, really important questions. I've outlined for you some of the major patterns, and that hopefully, if I come back in a few years, I can give you more of those specific prescriptions for what exactly is the formula. But I'll leave you with my 3 take-homes. 1, every workout, single workout, right after the workout, gives your brain literally a bubble bath of beneficial neurochemicals, including growth factors. 2, moving your body regularly will help you grow your shiny new brain cells in your hippocampus. And 3, moving your body regularly is like a shield that is really protecting your brain from aging and neurodegenerative disease states. And we are getting more and more sophisticated at knowing those pathways, whether it be metabolic, physiological, molecular, that are conferring those levels of protection. And I just leave you with the idea that exercise physiology and all of the wonderful work being done in the American College of Sports Medicine, we have a lot in common, and we should be collaborating more in the fight to improve our own cognition. I use it to improve my cognition, but I'm also using it to stave off aging, to stave off Alzheimer's disease, and this is what I want to develop in the next years in the work that I'm doing in my lab. Thank you so much for your attention, and I am happy to open it up to any questions that anybody has.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. We do have several questions.
Great.
The most popular question is, folks would like you to discuss a little bit more about the exercise technique that you showed us earlier. First off, can you spell the name of it and let folks know where they can learn more about it?
Absolutely. So it's called INTEN, from the word intention, I-N-T-E-N, and then the second part of the word is sati, S-A-T-I, and that is a Pali word that means mindfulness or awareness. So where can you learn more about it? There's a DVD that you can get on Amazon to give you classes. There are teacher trainings going on. You can go to, I can't remember whether it's intensati.com or Patricia Moreno is the inventor of Intensati. It's a fantastic, fun and engaging exercise formula. I teach it. I still teach it. I love teaching it. I love doing it. So that is kind of the best resources that I can give.
Fabulous. There are also a lot of people who are wondering about the research that's been done for these benefits. Is it predominantly in cardiovascular activity, or does strength training also provide some of these benefits?
That is a great question. So the vast majority of all the exercise work in terms of cognition has been done using some form of aerobic activity, but more and more studies have been looking at the effects of strength training as well. Because there's less strength training studies, it's harder to, the studies are more mixed, but that could be because they haven't kind of hit on the best formula to get the cognitive benefits. It could be that, it still could be that the strength training somehow is associated with how cardio it gets, because we all know that a really hard strength training workout will get your heart rate up, at least a little bit. So that's still a little bit up in the air, but there are some studies showing improved cognition with strength training. And then I just also want to add that if you look at the full literature, the #1 age group that has been studied are older people over 65, because that is where cognition becomes critical. The second most popular population in the science literature to study are children. But my population that I want to focus on are right in the middle, are healthy adults, 30s, 40s. Why? Because we know that the people, even in their 40s, that's when the first neurobiological changes are happening if you are genetically predispositioned to start to develop Alzheimer's disease. And so that's when you have this wonderful window of opportunity to change your physical activity status and use the power of brain plasticity to start to protect your brain there. And so that's where my focus is part of my focus is on that group.
Excellent. There have also been several people who are asking about if this has been looked at within traumatic brain injury patients.
Well, actually, I have one study on the effects of regular exercise on traumatic brain injury. In fact, that is my only study to date in which the mode of exercise that we used was intensati, which was really fun. And so what did we find? We found that 8 weeks of twice a week intensati in subjects with traumatic brain injury. And as you know, that you can get traumatic brain injury at any age. So we had people from their 20s all the way up to their 60s. They happened to be in this traumatic brain injury cohort at the Rusk Center for Rehabilitative Medicine. So we found significant mood improvements after the 8 weeks of intensati, which is very important for traumatic brain injury, where mood and depression and anxiety are a big issue. So yes, there's a small group of papers that have studied exercise and traumatic brain injury.
All right, awesome. Looks like we will have time for one more question.
Great.
And a few people have asked about if any of these studies have been done in folks with cancer-related cognitive impairment or those who are going through chemotherapy.
Yeah, I think there have been, there's always a sprinkling of exercise studies in so many of these situations where, given this literature, you might think it would be helpful. The answer is yes, it's a sprinkling. I don't have the, those results on the tip of my tongue, but do I think that it would be helpful? Absolutely. Exercise is, first of all, we're learning how broad exercise is, all the different brain areas and physiological areas, obviously, where exercise is having an effect, but also the wide range of, talk about brain-body connection, from your liver to your muscles, all the way, with a direct connection to improving hippocampal neurogenesis. This is something that we had no idea of just 10, 15 years ago. So I think there are so many interesting directions. I've been interested in ADHD, because, as we know, prefrontal function is very strongly affected by exercise. How can that be used to help these kinds of conditions? So the answer is yes, but just a smattering.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Suzuki. And we want to remind everybody that the CEC bundle for recorded sessions for the virtual summit series will be available beginning on Monday. Many of you are asking about a potential recording of today's session. If you purchase the bundle, again, that bundle will be available beginning on Monday at acsmsummit.org. Those bundles will include a recording of today's session. Additionally, those of you who are ACSM members will be able to watch a recording of today's session on the ACSM website in your member benefits area.